New York State Attorney General Letitia James is cracking down on e-cigarette maker JUUL once again. Today, the state filed a lawsuit against the company, and James is at her office in Manhattan to address the lawsuit right now. Let's take a listen in.
The ads failed to warn consumers that JUUL's products contained nicotine, which is highly addictive and particularly dangerous for teenagers. A 2016 survey revealed that roughly 1/3 of teens surveyed reported that they thought JUUL and other e-cigarette products were harmless. In subsequent years, JUUL's social media presence continued to focus heavily on attracting young audiences. And a 2018 study found that approximately 45% of the individuals who were following the official JUUL Twitter account in April 28 were between the ages of 13 and 17, while only 20% of the followers were 21 years or over. In addition to marketing to young New Yorkers, JUUL engaged in direct outreach to high school students, which is why we have the principal of one of our preeminent schools here today, including to at least one New York City high school, where a JUUL representative falsely stated to this freshman that its products were safer than cigarettes. The damage done by the company's ads since its launch has already been felt by millions of youth across the country. And to date, there have been 42 deaths and more than 2,000 cases of severe vaping-related illnesses nationwide, including 146 New Yorkers who have suffered vaping-related illnesses. And tragically, right here in New York City, in October of 2019, in the borough of the Bronx, a 17-year-old boy died due to a vaping-related illness, making that the first vaping fatality in New York and the youngest vaping fatality in the United States. There can be no doubt that JUUL's aggressive advertising has significantly contributed to the public health crisis that has left youth in New York and across the country addicted to its products. By glamorizing vaping, while at the same time downplaying the nicotine found in vaping products, JUUL is putting countless New Yorkers at risk and compromising the health of millions of young people. This lawsuit reaffirms my commitment to protect the health and safety of our youth. And so we have filed this most extensive lawsuit, again, on behalf of the youth of New York State. And now I invite Matt Myers, the president of Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, to share a few words. Thank you. Thank you.
Today we face an unprecedented epidemic of historic proportions. In just 2 years, we have seen the percentage of our high school students who use e-cigarettes more than double, and the percentage of our middle school students who use e-cigarettes more than triple. It is the most rapid rise in kids addicted to nicotine or any other substance in the more than 40 years the federal government has been measuring drug abuse in our country. To some, these are just statistics, but every one of these individuals is somebody's son or daughter or brother and sister and friend. JUUL may not think so, but these are our nation's kids. What is unique about this crisis is that it has been largely driven by the behavior and products of one company, JUUL Labs, and the conscious, knowing decisions of its executives. From the introduction of its sleek, sweet-flavored, high-tech products to the innovations that allowed them to deliver massive, unprecedented levels of nicotine to kids in a manner that eliminated the harshness that has made it so difficult for so many to smoke cigarettes, to the chemical manipulation of the products, so that parents and teachers could not smell on the kids' breath whether they were using these products, to marketing, to use the exact same tactics, the exact same themes, in the exact same images used by the tobacco industry 50 years ago. But to make it even worse, they did so through social media, so that it went on for years before individuals realized what was going on. The harmful result of JUUL's actions cannot be overstated. You already heard today more than 5.3 million middle and high school students use e-cigarettes. JUUL is at the center of that. 60% of those kids use JUUL's product. The problem is even worse, because these kids are not just experimenting, but because of the nature of JUUL, these kids are becoming addicted at a rate we have not seen in decades. In 2019, 1.6 million high school and middle school students used e-cigarettes more than 20 days a month, a sure sign of addiction. If you want to compare it to cigarettes, that's more than 3.5 times more serious than the level of cigarettes. JUUL's official claims that its popularity among youth is purely accidental, and that the product's social media presence following its launch was beyond the company's control. However, as this lawsuit documents clearly, the evidence tells a very different story. Indeed, we now know that JUUL bragged internally, that it studied carefully the documents obtained from the tobacco companies about how they marketed to kids. As this complaint today documents, this crisis didn't just happen, it was caused. The rise in e-cigarette use among our youth coincides exactly with the rise in the sale of JUUL e-cigarettes. It isn't a coincidence. The vast majority of youth today who are addicted use the flavored e-cigarettes of the type promoted by JUUL, with fruit, menthol, or mint, the most commonly reported flavors. Today, I'm happy to say, JUUL's aggressive, irresponsible actions are being met by an equally aggressive response by our governmental officials. And that's what's critical if we're going to reverse the epidemic. Today's lawsuit is a powerful and necessary response. Hopefully, it is part of a broad, comprehensive response to remove the flavored e-cigarettes that have fueled the youth e-cigarette epidemic. Indeed, hopefully later this month, the New York City Council will consider a bill to remove those products, and hopefully early next year, the New York State Legislature will do so. Today, I'm here on behalf of all of New York's kids. We want to personally thank and commend the Attorney General and pledge that we and all of our public health partners will work with her and her team both to hold JUUL accountable and to ensure that our kids are accurately, adequately, and well-informed. Thank you.
So much. Previously, my colleague in North Carolina filed a case against JUUL, and just yesterday, my colleague in California filed a case against JUUL. The next speaker is Andre Richardson, the campaign manager for Flavors Hook Kids NYC.
Good afternoon. My name is Andre Richardson, campaign manager for Flavor Hooks Kids NYC, and we are a coalition made up of parents, students, teachers, labor unions, and civil rights groups. I'm here today to applaud this measure and this lawsuit by the Attorney General against JUUL. We've been organizing over the last 10 months with an education and awareness campaign across New York City. JUUL has been nothing more than a wolf in wolf's clothing, with recycled playbook from the past using hypnotic advertising to hook kids as young as 11 and 12 years old. And what they've said internally is if we can hook a kid at 11, we will have a customer for life. To echo the earlier speakers, there's been more kids that have tried electronic cigarettes than live in the borough of Brooklyn and Manhattan combined. This is nothing short of an epidemic. 80% of kids who try e-cigarettes try a flavored product. In that flavored product, we also have menthol, which is the most addictive product that there is. Black folks are 18 times more likely to smoke a menthol product. There's 2 bills before the City Council today. We're asking the City Council to have the leadership that the Attorney General has here today and get these bills passed. We're here to say to Big Tobacco and to JUUL, enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Adam Fine, the principal of East Hampton High School in East Hampton, New York.
Thank you. I am relieved to be here today. I spent 2 days last week being trained by the FBI National Academy on how to deal with an active shooter situation in my school. For years now, I and my colleagues have been on high alert for this type of deadly assault, but no one alerted us to the premeditated and to date a very successful assault on my students' brains and lungs by JUUL. JUUL promised fun, romance, sociability, just like big tobacco companies did for decades. And JUUL used social media to entice young kids to breathe in its specially formulated, highly addictive nicotine. JUUL now claims to have made a mistake, never intending to market their poison to my students. I invite the co-founders of JUUL to come to my high school and try to defend that lie. Or better yet, present your excuses to the 16-year-old kid who was once a star athlete on the honor roll and now is in tears in desperation because he can't quit. Over 65% of my 900 students are vaping. That's approximately 650 youngsters between the ages of 14 and 18. So do not believe the federal government's guesstimates about the number of kids using e-cigarettes. They are wrong. Millions and millions of young kids are addicted, and every day more are being enticed by JUUL to begin. In addition to the physical, emotional, and psychological injuries to my students, there are substantial financial costs which I have been forced to pay out of other programs, thus shortchanging programs for students and staff. A conservative estimate is around $180,000 a year. We have come to realize that we cannot discipline our way out of this epidemic. Suspensions and expulsions won't work. They won't help. We need to move away from a punitive system to a therapeutic program that will cost money that our local taxpayers do not have. So like other schools around the country, we are exploring reimbursement from JUUL for the costs to try to combat this epidemic they started and continue to inflame. My colleagues and I will not continue to allow JUUL to make billions of dollars while our taxpayers are forced and robbed of millions of dollars. That is why I stand here today with Attorney General James, whose courage and commitment to young people, my kids, is crucial to saving the next generation of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge my dedicated team who worked around the clock on this issue. First, the Special Counsel Mo Fajani of the Executive Division, the Assistant Attorney General Emily Al-Etta of the Consumer Frauds Bureau, with assistance from Tobacco Enforcement Section Chief Leslie Ann Cajola, Senior Enforcement Counsel John Oleski, and Bureau Chief Lisa Landau, all of the Bureau Care, the Healthcare Bureau, the Section Chief Amy Shallop, and the Bureau Chief Jane Azier of the Consumer Frauds Bureau, with support from Jody Feld, the Chief Scientist, and Jeffrey Frolick, the intern, both of the Environmental Protection Bureau. The case is supervised by Chief Deputies Attorney Megan Fox and Chris D'Angelo, and supervised by the First Deputy Attorney General Jennifer Levy. Before we start with questions, I know one of the questions that you will probably pose to me is, what are we seeking? I'm glad you asked. One, we are seeking a permanent injunction against JUUL and any other entity through which it may act from engaging in the deceptive and fraudulent advertising and illegal practices alleged here in the complaint. Two, we are seeking an order directing JUUL to pay into an abatement fund with sufficient capital to eliminate the public nuisance it is responsible for creating. Three, we are seeking civil penalties of $5,000 to the state of New York pursuant to General Business Law Section 350D for each instance of deceptive or unlawful act or practice that violates the law. We are also seeking civil penalties of $1,000 to the state of New York for each instance of a sale. We are also seeking restitution and damages to the state of New York based on their fraudulent, deceptive, and illegal practices. And we're also seeking reimbursements as a result of the costs to the great state of New York. And lastly, we are seeking an order directing JUUL to produce an accounting of their profits and to disgorge all profits resulting from the fraudulent and illegal practices alleged herein. Again, we are seeking JUUL from refraining from this type of behavior and particularly targeting young people in the great state of New York. We will take on-topic questions first and then off-topic. Yes, sir.
My understanding is that the vast majority of these illnesses, if not all of them, have been related to vaping marijuana. I'm wondering how we can reconcile that. Is there any proof that the JUUL products themselves cause this kind of lung disease, harm, or death?
So again, the harm that we have caused is the result of all the individuals who are suffering from respiratory problems as a result of the harmful chemicals contained in JUUL products. We have not engaged in any investigation as it relates to its ties to marijuana. We can only talk to you about the harms created by these products and the deceptive business practices and the false advertising that this company engaged in, and that's why we are seeking restitution, penalties, and disgorgement of their profits. Question? Yes, sir.
What is the total dollar amount that you're seeking?
We don't have a dollar amount for you. Again, there'll be, as you know, as we launch this investigation or file this investigation, there will be some discovery, and we can get to that final amount at a later point.
You ballpark it?
I'm not going to ballpark it at this point. Then you'll hold me to it. Any other questions? The case was filed as of today. Yeah. Principal fine?
As well, or is this just your support of this lawsuit?
This is a support of this lawsuit. Our district is currently in consideration and reviewing that now in conjunction with other districts in Suffolk County.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
And will you unite with other states?
So again, I support my colleague in North Carolina, Josh Stein, and I also support Attorney General Becerra in California, who filed this lawsuit yesterday.
Well, another question. Still, we are talking about a startup which has received quite a lot of billion also from other tobacco companies. But is there a risk that this company might just, the startup might just close down?
You mean file bankruptcy? So again, we will pursue our remedies in bankruptcy court, and so that will not prevent us. Bankruptcy can be set up in such a way as we can recover penalties and damages as a result of all of the harm and destruction they've caused in the great state of New York.
Mr. Fine, can you say a little bit more about how this is affecting your students? You mentioned that one stars to make it, I don't know, just generally.
So in general, about 3.5 years ago, when we had seen a cessation of big tobacco in our building, we basically had nothing to deal with. Now we're seeing it, obviously, as my numbers indicated, on a monumental scale. I would say you'd be hard-pressed in my building, and I can generalize that probably to other high schools, to find students who have not tried vaping. We're dealing with it. Suspensions. I think in the beginning of the year, the first month, I had 23 in-school and out-of-school JUUL-related vaping suspensions. So that's when we kind of dialed it back. But it is interfering on every aspect of school day, whether it be teaching, whether it be what my assistant principals do, what my paraprofessionals in the hallways do. They're attending to this while other things are not being attended to. Again, we have very finite resources on Long Island. And as you probably know from being in the news, you know how the tax burden is on Long Island regarding property taxes. So we're really finite in what we do. And when we propose our budget in May, we don't have a line that dealing with kids vaping. And now we're really looking at it from a perspective of therapeutic angle.
Well, just speaking of that therapeutic system, can you just elaborate what you mean by that? What needs to be done?
So right now, we're working on, when we have kids with problems, we've kind of cross-contracted with LICAD, which is the Long Island Council for Alcohol and Drug Dependency, to come in and work with our kids who, when they're caught or when they're vaping in school or if they ask for help, we have a huge aspect product that we've obtained from private funding to help kids with mental illness as it relates to comorbidity with tobacco use, nicotine use, and drug use. So we have funding for that was privately obtained years ago for mental health illnesses. We're also working with a professor in Stanford on her program that she brought in to help with vaping education. We feel we're going to end up using more of the LICAD model because it's an in-person model.
Yeah. Let me just also say, as I travel the state of New York, we have a vaping crisis. We also have an opioid crisis. And so the state of New York is seeking reimbursement, again, in penalties and disgorgement from these companies that have caused the destruction and the death of countless number of individuals in the state of New York. There is a health crisis in the state of New York. And so this office obviously is in the forefront of that fight. Yes, ma'am.
Often the argument from JUUL's point of view is that there's not a lot of research, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with the vape pens, it's the illegal black market. How do you respond to that?
JUUL has 70% of the market, and clearly they advertise to youth. They engaged in deceptive advertising. They went to a number of schools, including the school in East Hampton, and indicated that the product was safe when it was not, and that it did not contain nicotine when it does. And so as a result of that, they should be held accountable for their actions. Yeah.
Because you know there's an attempt to ban vaping on a statewide level through the executive branch with construction of money. What do you
Yes.
think is the best remedy to do that? Is it through the executive branch, or do you think legislation should be taken up?
My understanding is that there's pending legislation by Senator Hoylman and Assemblywoman Bashat from Brooklyn. And so as a result of that, it's my understanding that those pieces of legislation will be taken up in the legislative session. I understand that there is a bill pending in the City Council. We are taking action. I believe all fronts need to take action against this health crisis. Yes.
Were you lobbied by Flavors for Kids or any of the partners to bring this case? I mean, did they work with you on putting it together?
So we began investigation in 2018, and so the advocates just met with us recently, but our investigation was way before any meeting with the advocates. Two, it's also important to know that it was as a result of media accounts, we've been reading about this healthcare crisis, and we're very concerned about its impact on young people in the state of New York. And lastly, the death of that 17-year-old young gentleman in the Bronx just made up my mind that we need to move forward, and we need to move forward aggressively, extensively, comprehensively, and we need to do it before anyone else does it. We don't need to be convinced by any advocates or any other lobbyists. We did it because it was in the interest of justice.
In terms of the sales to minors, how many are we talking about?
The exact number of the sales to minor, we can get that number to you. It was related to vaping. I don't know if the product, in fact, was JUUL, but since JUUL has 70% of the market, I don't know whether or not the individual was using a JUUL product, but clearly as a result of all of their advertising and the notion that a significant number of young people thought that e-cigarettes were safe, JUUL has to take responsibility for their actions.
What is the possible impact of this lawsuit on JUUL?
So JUUL, again, is a profitable company, and so it's really critically important that JUUL be disgorged of all of its profits, and that those profits be used towards education for programs such as the principal mentioned, and obviously to reimburse the state of New York for the cost of taking care of individuals who have been hospitalized and who suffer from respiratory problems.
How do you differentiate between ads like this that are maybe geared toward younger people as opposed to geared toward underage people? I mean, how is this specifically geared toward children?
So again, I think this, because of social media and because of the different colors of the products, they used menthol, they used mango, they used mint. All of these flavored products were geared towards young people, minors, as well as teenagers and tweens. And so as a result of that, we are seeing an entire generation of individuals who are hooked to vaping.
Could I add?
Sure.
Adults also like those flavors?
Could I just, there's a really important thing to know about JUUL. From the year JUUL became popular, We saw a dramatic rise in youth use of e-cigarettes. We saw no rise. I want to emphasize the word no rise in the percentage of adults who use e-cigarettes. In 2015, when JUUL came on the market, roughly 3.5 to 3.7% of adults used e-cigarettes. Last year, that number was 3.2%. During the same period, the rise in the use of e-cigarettes among kids, underage kids, rose geometrically. The entire chart rise of sales in the e-cigarette market during those years was underage sales. So when JUUL says we're concerned about adults, either they're the worst marketers in the history of mankind, or that you shouldn't believe what they're saying.
Aren't you concerned that by going into JUUL, that you're gonna, that other smaller companies, other entities will come in and try to fill that vacuum of the pens?
So if other companies try to fill that vacuum, we will initiate litigation against those companies as well. We have a healthcare crisis in the state of New York, and it's really critically important that we not advertise and or target e-cigarettes towards young people, and that we have the appropriate warnings, and that we do the proper education, and that individuals understand the harmful effects of vaping.
My question is a little similar, but not so much that they'll revert to there will be a vacuum for other e-cigarette companies to step in, but that the youth that are now addicted to nicotine will now revert to actual tobacco.
I don't think we should be concerned about the collateral consequences. I think what we need to do is take action against JUUL for the harm that it's caused and destruction that it's caused, and the fact that they are taking a page out of cigarettes companies, and individuals need to understand the harmful effects of vaping. A significant number of individuals, unfortunately, are suffering from these respiratory problems, and I can't not sit back and allow this to continue to occur in the state of New York, particularly after the death of a young person in the Bronx, which was due to vaping.
Just if you can reiterate for the camera, just the rules that are in place for stores in New York, as well as just talking about banning flavors.
I'm sorry.
Just in terms of regulations that are imposed in New York to stop at the sale of, let's say, the black market of the pods, for example.
So again, they're not supposed to sell to underage individuals. There was a law passed in November of last year, and unfortunately, JUUL and other companies continue to sell to minors, underage individuals. There is a warning sign with respect to the fact that it contains nicotine, but it's too little, too late. An entire generation of individuals, unfortunately, have been addicted to e-cigarettes, and so we have a responsibility as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the state of New York to protect young people, and that's what we are doing with this litigation. We are now going to, I've got to take my friend in the back who's sitting down. It's the last question on topic.
So I'm just reading here that Altria, one of the world's largest cigarette manufacturers, bought 35% of JUUL at the end of last year for $12.8 billion. So would this lawsuit allow you to reach into their treasury as well as a result of there being such a large?
So let me just say that I can't specify our legal strategy. But going forward, all individuals who are responsible for the destruction that has been caused in the state of New York, you can be assured that this office will pursue those individuals and not be limited to any one particular company. Off topic.
Ms. James, undercover Newsday
And we've been watching a press conference held by New York State Attorney General Letitia James. Today, New York filed a suit against JUUL, an electric cigarette company, over its unethical practices. And we will have much more in just a moment.